request all the alumni who have connected with us through YouTube to drop in their questions, if any, in the YouTube live chat box, which we will pick at the end. We, the Guest Lectures Committee, bring you the 5th conversation under Careers in Conversation, an elite and exclusive platform to gather with eminent speakers from different walks of life, reflecting on their personal and professional voyages. This platform aims to provide ample learning opportunities through real-life stories to faculty, students, and alumni alike. Today, we delve into playing to potential. So today, for our 5th conversation, we welcome our distinguished guest, Deepak Jayaraman sir, a dynamic and visionary leader. The conversation will be led by Raman sir, Director at Somaiya Institute of Management. Now, I would request the Faculty Head of Guest Lectures Committee, Arun sir, a Professor of Practice in Finance and Lead Corporate Relations, to introduce today's guest.
Thank you, Rashi. Good evening, everyone. It's my honor to introduce Deepak Jayaraman, leadership coach and executive advisor based in Mumbai. Deepak has a remarkable journey that began with a BTech from IIT Madras, followed by a PGDM from IIM Ahmedabad. After his IIM Ahmedabad stint, he got into KPMG, worked there for around 5 years, then did another MBA in organizational leadership from London Business School, leading him to McKinsey, worked in US and India for around 3 years, and subsequently spent another 5 years with another great company, Egon Zehnder. And the journey thereafter is even more impressive as the founder and CEO of Transition Insight, which specializes in helping leaders navigate critical career transitions. As the curator of the Play to Potential podcast, Deepak engages in conversation with leaders across various disciplines, exploring themes around leadership, transitions, and personal growth. He has also authored the book Play to Potential, Lead a Full Life, Become the Best You, where he talks about how one can lead a holistic life and do justice to the various identities one holds. I am quite eager to listen to this fireside chat that would surely going to empower us all to elevate our leadership skills and embrace new challenges. But before this interesting conversation starts, I request Dr. Raman to felicitate our guest.
So maybe let me start with, how I got to know you, because it's also a bit of a lesson corporate navigation and influencing decisions. So when I was the managing director of BSF, I was very unhappy with my HR. He wasn't really playing to potential. So I, of course, multinational corporation, it's not just my decision, because it's a regional HR head, and I spoke to the regional HR head and said, "What, are you mad? He is the best man I've got in the whole of Asia Pacific." So finally, after multiple discussions, we agreed that we will have a neutral person evaluate. So I reached out to Egon Zehnder. The person who was recommended from Egon Zehnder was Deepak, and that's where our relationship started. Of course, there is a story behind that, how we eventually got to the decision of, yes, maybe this HR person is not adequate and changing the HR person. But that's where we started. And whenever there is a dilemma that we have, either with me or in my family, Deepak is the sage that we reach out to. More recently, my daughter had master's, she had a couple of offers, and she's kind of really finding it difficult to make a decision. So I said, look, I'll give you Deepak's number. Speak to him. He's the person who will try to kind of help you take this decision. And I can tell you that he followed your advice, and today it has been the right decision. So that's Deepak's kind of background and my relationship. But Deepak, I always start these conversations with your childhood. Essentially, some of the influences from your childhood which may have influenced who you are today, the kind of careers that you took, and what dreams do you have when you were growing up, and did it pan out?
First of all, Raman, thank you for the kind words and for having me. It's wonderful to be in the middle of young minds. Actually, I was telling Raman, in 2 weeks I'm actually going back to IMA for my 25-year reunion, and sort of very eagerly looking forward to going back to campus and reliving some of those moments. So it's always wonderful to see people, young minds full of possibilities. Maybe just rewinding the clock, Raman. I come from the Indian middle class, if I may say. My father was a public sector banker with a bank called Indian Bank. He spent 40 years in the bank, one company all the way, end to end. And actually, I grew up in a family. I come from South India, as my name suggests. And in general, entrepreneurship was not something that was celebrated. Right? It was the narrative in my family would be, my father would say, public sector ki naukri hai, aaj hai, kal bhi rahegi. Private sector mein, who knows, you might lose your job. So there was always a little bit of that risk aversion. And just protect whatever you have. And I think initial years were in small towns in Tamil Nadu like Velur, Kadalur, Salem. Some of you may not have even heard of these terms. My mom comes from a town called Madurai in Tamil Nadu. Then he had a posting in a place called Gwalior in Madhya Pradesh for 4 years. 4th standard to 8th standard I was in Gwalior. I remember a large part of my childhood was, I would study, but play was a big part of my growing up, just going and playing cricket with friends and just being out there in the ground and just having fun playing. And my father would come and play with me. That's something I remember. He really spent time playing with me. And then at some point, my father actually, it's interesting, he lost a promotion when I was in my 7th standard. In Gwalior, despite performing well, there was some politics. He wasn't promoted. So he said, given my career is not progressing, let me at least solve for my children's education. So why don't we go to a metro and at least ensure that kids go to a good school. And then my mom and my dad decided to come back to Chennai. And in a way, at that stage, they had a choice of putting us in one of 2 schools. One was a good school, which was established, and the other was an up-and-coming school, which was much higher fees. And I remember my parents discussing, this would be a pinch. We'll have to, it will eat into our savings, but still, let's invest in the future. And I'm very grateful for that, because in a way that, if I go back to the various decisions that have shaped who I am, that one decision in a way, from then on I would say peer momentum took me. I happened to be in a class with a lot of young, hungry, hardworking people. So that gave me the discipline to prepare for IIT, got into IIT, and then I would say that took me to multiple places. So I think back to childhood, I feel play is one thing I remember very fondly, a lot of play. And I think I also come from a family where the belief was, go after Saraswati, Lakshmi hopefully will be taken care of. Don't obsess about Lakshmi too early. So I think,
nice way to,
so in a way, education for education's sake. So even LBS, since you mentioned it, maybe people find it puzzling that they say you went to IMA, why go to London Business School? I worked with, after IMA, I got a chance to work with KPMG Consulting in London for 2 years. And then I came back to India, I was working in Mumbai. And then somehow, the global career took off, right? I think till then, I would say, if you look at 80s and 90s, India was exporting engineers. But around 90s and 2000s and beyond, they started exporting managerial talent. So somehow I felt I'd missed that wave. And initially I wanted to do a PhD, because after IIT, the pathway I did not choose was a fellowship at UT Austin. I had a fellowship, I got into IMA. So there was this desire to study in the West. So I wanted to do a PhD, but the advice I got was, if you want a global career, then do an MBA from a good school. On an MPV basis, it will make sense. So I think once again the advice is a lot of people say just do a 1-year degree, just get it done with, get a job and move on. But somehow I said if I'm going there, I'd rather study and learn. In general, even with the podcast, we've, my team, Akash and Armana here, my team members, we've tried to focus on creating good quality content and focusing on the learning, rather than obsessing about the metrics or the monetization or the paywalls. So somewhere the implicit belief all through has been focus on Saraswati and Lakshmi will follow. So I think those are some of the things.
So your career as being read out, I think most all of you would agree. It's like a dream career for any average Indian. You get into KPMG, then you're in McKinsey, a great consulting career, and you just give it up, and then you come back and you get into, this head hunting job with Egon Zehnder, so to speak, right? For want of a better term. And then you give it all up at the prime of your life and start something on your own. So can you tell us a little bit about what were the triggers and what was the thought process behind this kind of what appears to be very, very radical, risky changes in your life?
Very sure. So my father used to be a big fan of the band Beatles, and he used to make me listen to a lot of their songs. And one of the songs by John Lennon has this beautiful words, life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. So in a way, I think that's been something I've learned, where you make plans, but then there is life, which often God has a different script. So for me, I think I spoke about going to LBS. I wanted to pursue a global career. Yes, I got a job at McKinsey. I got a chance to work in New Jersey. So till then, things were going per my plan. In 2008, my father unfortunately got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer back in Chennai. So I'm the elder child. I have a younger sister who lives in Bangalore. So somehow I felt it was stage 4. I could not deal with the cancer diagnosis as a tourist. I realized that if I really wanted to if I wanted to take ownership, I had to relocate. And McKinsey was kind enough to give me a transfer back to India, short-term transfer. So I moved back to Chennai, and I think this is where sometimes things happen. Destiny is a strange thing where McKinsey, till that time, till 2007, had only 2 offices in India, Bombay and Delhi. Around that time, it opened the 3rd office in Chennai, 2008. Right? When I moved from New Jersey to Chennai, what is the probability of something like that happening, right? So I spent some time with him. 6 months, unfortunately, he passed away. We could only palliate. But when it was time for me to go back to New Jersey, now that he passed away, so my wife and I said, okay, let's go back to our Western life. Lehman, the financial crisis triggered by Lehman happened. So what happened was the US economy went south. There were no new projects for consultants in the US. And the US office said, if you're in India, stay in India, don't come back. Because we don't have projects, we can take you back. But if we don't have projects, then at some time, it's going to be tricky to justify all this. That's around the time one of my mentors, Ramesh Mangaleshwaran, who's a senior director at McKinsey, who was retired recently, he looked at me and said, you seem to have a passion for the people side of things. Have you thought of such? And I think the context I should give here is that McKinsey consultants would be looked at 3 different dimensions: IQ, CQ, and RQ. IQ is just the intellect, your problem-solving capability, your ability to solve tough problems. CQ is capability quotient, which is your ability to manage clients, your ability to manage projects, your ability to manage work streams, etc. And RQ is relationship quotient, which is how good are you with the people on the client side, how good are you with people in your teams. Can you hear me? Is the audio okay?
Yes.
Okay, no problem. So he came and said, why don't you double down on your RQ and do more people-related work. So that took me to executive search with this firm Egon Zehnder, which helps companies recruit CEOs, CXOs, and board members, and helps companies with leadership related, like the decision he spoke about, either leadership assessment or development or leadership hiring. So in a way, that was sort of the transition from McKinsey to Egon Zehnder. I would say a combination of personal circumstance coupled with a nudge from a mentor and a well-wisher. Now things were motoring along at Egon Zehnder, got a chance to work with lovely people, sort of in a way, every client you work with, you get to learn something from them as well. But along the way, I realized that in executive search, you're always evaluating people, right? That's why clients pay you money. I realized 3 years in, Govind Nayyar, who's my mentor, and I think he's been a guest in one of the earlier conversations here. When I was having my year-end appraisal conversation with him, he asked me, Deepak, tell me what have been the high points in the last year. Tell me one point which gave you joy. And as I reflected, I remember telling him one of my high points was when I had this conversation with the CEO about his career, and he later wrote me an email saying this chat was probably the most valuable chat I've had across multiple people. Now Govind looked at me and said, that's wonderful, but that's not how we make money. We don't make money by counseling candidates, we make money by helping clients find candidates. So I realized that what gave me joy was a footnote in a research consultant's life, number one. And around that time I was having coffee with a friend of mine, and I was discussing this incident with him. And he said, yeah, I think that makes sense. You seem to have more of a coaching orientation than a poaching orientation. And that again was like a penny drop moment for me. So that was sort of, that growing, if I may say, the growing dissonance with search was one context. The other is we had our second child. My children are now much older now. My daughter is in grade 9, son is in grade 4. But when my son was born, I felt the family work equation had shifted. And I realized that when you work for another organization, they set the pace of the treadmill. And Raman, you're a runner, so you know, I realized I wanted to run my race at my pace, not at the pace that somebody else sets for me. So I think it was a combination of these two things. And I think back to my childhood, I did not see myself as an entrepreneur, to be honest. 10 years back, would I have invested in myself? No. But my wife said, what's the worst thing that could happen? You try this for a year or two. Otherwise, you just come back to the treadmill and do something else. So that's not. So we, in our mind, we had a stop loss for about 18 months. And I said, let me take the plunge and see what happens. So I started advisory around transitions. And then the podcast journey started and Akash Sharma joined me. And then touch wood, one thing has led to another, and it's been a positive journey.
So no regrets in any of those decisions?
No regrets in each of these decisions, but since you mentioned no regrets a couple of times, one of the guests of the podcast was a gentleman called Dan Pink, who's written a book called The Power of Regret. And he actually says no regrets is a bad idea. And he says regrets often are like the photographic negative of the life you could have led.
Okay.
And one of the regrets I've had, if I may, is my favorite course in IIT Ahmedabad was organizational behavior. I used to love discussions around.
There is an expert sitting there.
But I kept telling myself that you're an IIT Madras alumnus, you should be good at quant. You should solve these difficult equations. You should solve the Black-Scholes equation. You do options and futures, because that was like the cool thing to do. And it took me, 15, 20 years to really discover that actually people side of things was where my heart lay. So if there's one thing I would, if I went back in time, I would have listened to my inner voice a little more, and maybe I would have gotten here much faster.
I think that's a great message for a lot of the young people here, because sometimes a lot of your decisions are based not necessarily on what your heart tells you or what you're comfortable with, but because what is expected of you by your peers, by your parents, etc.
Or your past background, right? I came from IIT. I said, okay, so I have to like ops.
Yeah. I
have to like quant. I have to like finance. But maybe what you like and what you're good at might be different things.
Yeah. So think about it, guys. So come back to the book that you launched basically, and I had the pleasure of being at the book launch, and it was a great conversation. Thank you. But that book is actually targeted at people who are quote unquote having midlife crisis, right? In their mid-40s or
30s and beyond.
Late 30s and beyond, kind of stuck in their career, family. But there are a lot of very interesting messages for them. But for this, you see the audience here is all students who are going to start off on their career. So are there messages in that book for students who are starting off or people who are starting off on their career?
Sure. I think the primary audience of the book, as you rightly say, Raman, is for people who are dealing with the multidimensionality of life, right? There is health, there is family, there are your parents, there's demands that sort of pull you in different directions. One of the themes I discuss in the book is that a prerequisite to leading a full life. What I mean by the title of the book is Play to Potential. And when very often we use the word potential in one dimension, right? In the dimension of our work or career. But I say we all have potential in multiple areas, right? Like I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm a brother, I'm a coach, I like to play music, I am a guitarist, and so on and so forth. So how do we really unlock our potential in a multidimensional sense? That's the crux of the book. What I realize is, I spoke about my father, right? I think he worked in one organization for 40 years. If I look at people who worked in the 60s, 70s, 80s, a lot of them might be single organization men and women who worked all the way. And my intrinsic belief is, let's say, if you were to race on a straight road, 100-kilometer road and had two cars, the car that would win would probably be the car with a better engine, and that would sort of speed through the distance faster. But today I think we have an abundance of choices, and the careers are looking more and more like a maze with a lot of twists and turns. So the sort of the auto component that becomes relevant is a steering wheel. And to me that steering wheel is self-awareness, right? I realize that in a world of abundance of options, there's a lovely body of work by a gentleman called Barry Schwartz, who's written a book, Paradox of Choice. The simple way to explain this is when I was growing up, Doordarshan 1 was the only channel we had. Exactly. Right? And 7 o'clock there'd be a program on agriculture, Krishi Darshan, right? And we would watch it, believe it or not. And then in 93 when I went to IIT, we had a 100% increase in entertainment when DD Metro came, right? That is sort of context one. Today when I look at the number of channels, maybe 400 odd channels across categories, OTT platforms, WhatsApp, TikTok, Insta. There's clearly a 100x or a 1000x increase in the choices in terms of entertainment. But does that necessarily mean people are happier? I don't know. So Barry Schwartz says, in a world of abundance of options or abundance of choice, two things happen. One is decision making becomes complex. So what movie to watch at home is actually a half-an-hour conversation, right? Should we watch something on Hotstar, Amazon Prime, Netflix or TV, or we go to the movie hall? Sometimes it just, I remember in late 80s, 1:30 some regional movie would come on DD and we'd sit and watch, even if we don't understand the language, and we'd enjoy it. Second thing Barry Schwartz says is, in a world of abundance of choices, there is significant FOMO, fear of missing out, because if there are 100 things to choose from, you choose one. You're always saying, yeah, maybe I should have done one of the other 99. I've started out in P&G. Should I have done banking? Should I have done investing? Should I have done something else? So the answer, I feel, the long-term answer to this is really being aware of who you are, what drives you, what gives you joy, what your strengths are. So I think to answer your question, Raman, I think one big piece is just as much energy you're pouring into understanding the outer world, and I'm sure this place will give you a lot of tools and techniques to understand how the world of business works. If you can sort of spend enough or more energy and understanding the inner world in terms of what you enjoy, what your frustrations are, when are you at your best, I feel it will help you build a better steering wheel so that you're able to navigate the twists and turns. So that's sort of one theme that comes top of mind, Raman. The other piece, I think, which might be helpful, maybe I'll send a one-pager, maybe the visual is easier to understand. In the book, the crux of what I explain is flavor, right? I suggest people live a flavorful life. And just the headline is F is for family, tuning into family context. Let's not forget that, because all of us come from a certain context. L is having space for something that you truly enjoy, because I find that I've seen many leaders who pour their heart into work but end up being miserable souls because they don't have anything that they enjoy. The people around them are miserable, the families are miserable. So have something that you enjoy so that you bring joy to other people's life and to yourself. A, I say, is aspiration, which is around being multidimensional, not just focusing on ambition, but aspiration, which is a little more holistic.
Can you kind of run on the difference between both of them?
Ambition and aspiration? See, ambition is saying, I want to build a unicorn, or I want to be an MD by 40, or I want to earn this much money, or I want to buy this car, or I want to buy this home. Ambition is very often a single dimensional variable. Aspiration is saying, I want to be this kind of, again, I go back to the cover of the book is juggling multiple hats. Take each of the identity you have. Let's say if I'm a son, what kind of a son do I want to be? If I'm learning the guitar, what kind of a guitarist do I want to be? If I'm a coach. So trying to take, the simple way to understand is ambition is saying I want to get 100 in math, forget the other subjects. I'll fail in English, doesn't matter, I'll fail in geography. But aspiration is saying I want to do well in the exam of life across the various subjects, whichever is relevant. So that's aspiration. But the most interesting part I feel is the next piece, Raman, where I talk about BO. I feel we are going through a world where the whole concept of jobs is changing, right? Earlier, jobs were very well defined. You know, you're a marketing associate here, then you become an associate manager, then you become a VP, then you become a president, then you become an MD. But what I realize is just like we talk about dating in the context of finding your life partner, I think there is something called a talent market dating process, where you all have a certain set of talents and you need to find what the market, how that interfaces with the market. Initially, you might get clean jobs, you might be an associate somewhere, you might be an analyst somewhere, but you will find that 5 years out, 10 years out, you will have to date your way into the next opportunity. How do you present yourself? How do you position yourself? How do you discover the world of opportunity? How do you connect with people? How do you access the world of opportunity? So I think that is a muscle that very often we talk about entrepreneurship, people building companies, but I think there's an opportunity to be entrepreneurial in the way we access the world of careers and opportunities. That often doesn't get spoken about that much. So that is VO. U is investing in yourself, which is physical health, mental health, and capabilities, and R is relationships. So the word I use is flavor. How do you lead a flavorful life? Family, love, aspiration. How do you be a value seek opportunity? Invest in yourself and relationship. And every now and then, just like in ice cream, we say we need to have a flavor of the season. We all go through seasons. So can we rediscover our flavor as we go through life? That's the crux of what I propose through the book. But I would call the attention to the VO part in terms of just being aware of the talent market dating process and just not, very often what I notice is people that go to education institutes wait for opportunities to land on the lap. I did that mistake too. But I realized that finally all of us have to be entrepreneurial, and it's in a way our responsibility to sort of interact and figure out what the sweet spot is.
So can you kind of make that a little bit more practical to the young audience here? Saying, if you wanted to do that, what would be one or two steps that they could probably think about it?
Two things. One is, I would say, experiment. Internships. Maybe at this stage, one advice I give people graduating is don't obsess about things like, of course salary is important, you want to be paid well. But try and, if you are passionate about some field and somebody's giving you an opportunity, lean in. Don't obsess about the salary upfront for the first few years, right? Focus on the learning more than the earning. That's sort of one thing I've sort of learned, because very often I see people obsess about, yahan pe, the salary here is higher than here, so I'll go here. But I would say tune into where the opportunity or the learning might be higher and where you might find it more interesting. That's one. Second, I would say is relationships. Very often I find that, this is something I learned much later. If you get an opportunity to meet somebody, get to know them, build a connection with them. So I think two things. One is build a healthy relationship among your peer group. I think you will be surprised by what difference it makes in terms of the quality of relationships you carry internally, whether it's with alumni, maybe the previous batch. Some of them might have opportunities. And once in a while, we get to meet somebody of significance. So see if you can form a healthy relationships, be in touch, be of value. And if you cultivate that systematically over a period of time, I realize that it sort of yields disproportionate returns. So I think the one very tactical thing that occurs to me, Raman, is just experiment, index more on the learning than the earning, and sort of what you enjoy, and seek experiments, even if it's not a paid opportunity somewhere.
Yeah. So on relationship, so in this very room, in the last 3 days, you're the second person who is talking about relationship. Because last Saturday we had the alumni gathering here of 5 different types.
Yes.
industry looking for in MBA students, and what's the relevance of MBA. And one of our former alumni essentially got up and talked about the key thing that he gained out of doing this MBA was the relationship. Yeah. So I think remember that, you've got 600 peers, so build those relationships with your juniors, with your seniors, with the alumni, so many of them come around here. So great point.
And if I may share a very specific anecdote, right? When I was in McKinsey, New Jersey, and I got to know my father was diagnosed with cancer, I was trying to figure out how do I land back in McKinsey, India, and how do I structure that, right? And the person who came to my help was a friend, a batchmate of mine from IIT Madras. He said, I'll make it happen. I'll create a study, I'll create an opportunity for you, and I'll make the transfer happen. So if not for that, in a way, that was a period where, things could have gone very south.
Yeah.
But he gave me the lifeline for me to sort of, in a way, pick up the pieces and make that happen and then move on to this sort of the new, I may say, the next innings of my life. So I've been pleasantly surprised by the difference that some of the relationships can make. Even when I can keep going, right? Even in the podcast, some of the generosity I've seen from people has been really touching. So I couldn't underscore it more. The relationships, we underestimate the quality of the relationships and what they can do. So yeah, completely.
No, thanks for that. So while we are on the topic of self-awareness, you talked about, today with all the social media, our attention spans are pretty very short, and there are too many things that are for distraction. And again, so how does that inhibit you from being self-aware, and how do you kind of overcome and try some practices which can help you to become more self-aware?
True. I think
Because essentially, I think what probably has happened is the moments of time that you take to reflect is almost non-existent today.
True.
In the old days, because there were not too many distractions, at least some of us were forced to reflect. Right?
True.
Yeah, so that's kind of gone. So.
You're right. I think even in the bus, I remember I used to take the public transport bus from school to my classes and back. You had nothing to do. You would just stare out of the window and look at the traffic, and clearly not much to do. Now even with my daughter, I see her going with a phone, and I tell her, just look out of the window, and she clearly, not impressed with my ideas. I think two things happen, Raman. I feel one is sort of our inability to get in touch with ourselves, and it's a bit like a chain reaction, right? I think for us, what I've realized is when you stay with a thought for a period of time, it sort of gathers its own momentum and you get ideas and you get possibilities and so on. What happens is when that chain reaction gets cut in the third step or the fourth step or whatever, then quickly the power of the idea doesn't often accrue. The other thing that happens also is I find that deep work gets compromised. I've realized that ability to sort of really go deep in a topic, whatever that might be, and work for a long period of time, and therefore produce whatever substantial, it's not just research, right? Whatever we are doing.
Yeah.
So in my case, for example, when I said I wanted to write this book, my daughter happened to be doing a nature camp in Himachal Pradesh in Tirthan Valley. So I said, why don't I just take the opportunity to drop her and spend some time somewhere in Himachal for a week. So I drop her in the Delhi airport, disappear somewhere, and then pick her up. And I realized that 1 week gave me a lot of clarity around the book. Actually, in the podcast, till then we had been featuring guests. So when I spent that week, I said maybe given I wanted to write the book, I should pause collecting new dots and I should do a series on connecting the dots. And that insight came to me only when I was with myself. Otherwise, we were just sort of doing a repeat of whatever we were doing. So in the book, actually, to make it a little more tactical, I suggest, how many here have seen the movie Dunkirk by Christopher Nolan? Quite a few, right? For the benefit, who has not seen, let me ask the other question. Okay, maybe 30, 70. So Dunkirk is a movie set in the Second World War, where there's a group of British soldiers who need to be rescued. And there are 3 missions. One is a mission from the air, one is a mission through water, and third is a mission through land. And what's interesting about the movie is they show each of these in different time scales. The land mission is shown in the time span of a week. The water mission is shown in the time span of a day. And the air mission is shown in the time span of an hour. and it's sort of almost like three logarithmic scales coming together and sort of finishing at one climax. So the point I make, Raman, in the book is I think there's an opportunity for us to have different kinds of pauses, and I think each pause has a certain benefit. So one thing I suggest is, can you have some sort of an hourly pause? Let's say maybe pause for 5 minutes every hour. It's an opportunity to center yourself, gather your thoughts, and just bring your focus back on whatever you're doing. Is there an opportunity for you to pause maybe daily? Again, I don't prescribe these things, but the benefit of an hourly pause is different from the benefit of a daily pause. Then you get to focus on what gives you joy, what were the highs and lows. There is a benefit of a quarterly pause where maybe some significant activity, maybe you realize every quarter that you've not been focusing on your health, and you bring it back into shape. There's benefit of a yearly pause where you sometimes realize, a little more around what is your why, etc. But to really make it tactical to the students, I would say if you can bring some sort of a reflective practice and build a pause, maybe in simple terms, a pause in the middle of the day, a pause at the end of the day, not to make it overcomplicated. I think it would add disproportionate value. And I should claim that in school, when I was going to school, we had a course on transcendental meditation, and we all would laugh at that time. Right? It took me 25 years to see value in some of these things. But again, meditation is not for everybody. The limited point I would make is pause. Again, stop. A lot of us have a to-do list. I want to do this. But some of the leaders I work with, I ask, what is your to-be list? Sometimes it's helpful to say, I want to be thoughtful, I want to be a better listener, I want to be more tolerant, I want to be less reactive and respond more. So whatever, all of us can think about the kind of person we want to be, and the pause can help.
Great. So in your book, and there is also a technique about journaling.
Yes.
And, which I thought might be of interest. I know, we all prescribe journaling as coaches, and we don't do it, or at least I don't necessarily on a regular basis. Most of them don't. But I saw you had a snippet with Tim Ferriss.
Yes.
Yeah. Who talks about what he writes, and it relates to the deep work. So
yes.
So what you do in journaling, and I think at this very young age, it's really good to start this habit of journaling, which is essentially taking 15 minutes of pause in the evening, end of the day, and writing down your thoughts. Or Tim Ferriss, as he recommends, write down 3 or 4 things that happened. And for him, what was important was being able to read for a certain number of hours.
This is Jim Collins in the Tim Ferriss podcast.
Yeah, in the Tim Ferriss, Jim Collins, the guy who wrote that, Good to Great. Yeah.
Yes,
For
exactly.
him, the important thing was to spend a certain number of hours reading. So in his journaling, you would essentially write down how long did he spend reading and give it a ranking or a rating, right? -2 and +2. And over a period of time, you were able to develop a pattern. So when you lack this ability to have deep work and spend concerted amount of time, I think these are the kind of tools that might really help.
True. I think the other term that stayed with me in the podcast I run, Play to Potential podcast, I got a chance to talk to a person called Rich Fernandez. He runs this organization called Search Inside Yourself, which used to be a part of Google. Now Google helps you to search the world to make sense of what's out there. But they said, can we look at different disciplines and see how people can search inside themselves? And he says journaling, and he specifically says journaling is not about typing into a computer. I think there's something about pen to paper and the speed of writing. And he says that the simplest way to understand journaling is it's like running a version update on your phone or on your computer. So each time you run a version update, there's a slight improvement in the productivity of the machine. So similarly, he says when we journal, it's almost like the 0.1.1 or 9.1.3. So there is a small, and sort of finally life I've realized is just a series of small steps that compound over time. Journaling, I feel, is one of those baby steps.
So try it. It's very difficult to stick, but if you manage it, I'm sure you'll find it extremely useful. Last piece, maybe 5-10 minutes. You have now done 102 podcasts, and you have talked to some really big celebrities from Vijay Madras to Vishwanath Anand to everybody. So maybe a couple of most interesting kind of conversations that you've had. You already kind of given a few insights on the podcast. That some of the most interesting celebrities that you've spoken to.
I think I was talking to my colleague Akash before this. one of the people I spoke to was Atul Kasbekar. Have people in the room heard of Atul Kasbekar? He's a celebrated photographer. He was sort of the person behind the Kingfisher calendar and whatever. He shoots the Bollywood A-list and the cricket team and so on. He was actually a chemical engineer at UDCT. He was studying chemical engineering at UDCT. And he said something interesting which stayed with me. He said, I asked him, why did you pick chemical engineering? He said, I used to like chemistry in school a lot. So I joined chemical engineering. Within a week I realized chemical engineering has got nothing to do with chemistry. Exactly. So there's this, some things can be better said in Hindi than in English, right? In transitions especially, I realized that जो दिखता है वो है नहीं, जो है वो दिखता नहीं है. Right? The point is, very often you make a set of assumptions. You think you will like banking because you like solving finance problems, but banking might be actually very different from solving finance problems. So just be a little careful about the reasons you make a choice and the pathway. And very often, I just got a new shoe over the weekend. Somebody told me it's like a shoe bite. Before you buy the shoe, before you wear the shoe, you will never know where the bite is. You'll have to wear the shoe and walk for a week, and then you will know where the shoe bites. So transitions are a bit like that. So just be a little careful about how you make transitions. So rather than making it too conceptually, try and talk to a few people who live that life. Understand the day in a life and understand the highs, understand the lows. To me, that's a better way to say, I like finance, so I'll take banking. Or I like operations, so I'll go to Asian Paints, or I'll go to this DHL. Because the jobs might be very different from what you like. So just remember chemistry and chemical engineering, when it comes to career choices. And I think and cut losses, right? I think very often I feel there's a lot of talk about resilience and grinding it out there, but sometimes it might also be okay to cut losses if we get the wrong path. For example, one of the people I spoke to was Nandan Nilekani, who was the chairperson of Infosys, who was the mastermind behind the Aadhaar project, etc. So when I asked him, so he built Aadhaar, then he said he was a Rajya Sabha member when he did that. So he said, I wanted a ticket on the table. So Rajya Sabha, somebody nominated him. So I said, I want to get elected. So he contested for the Lok Sabha election in Bangalore and lost the election badly. And he said, when I campaigned, I realized that running the election was like a B2C business. I realized that I'm good at a B2B business because I'm a tech-led transformation agent and that's my superpower. So then he sort of cut his losses there, came back, and now he's sort of really evangelizing and playing the role as a tech evangelist. So I think the other piece I've realized is very often growing up, we talk about fixing weaknesses, but when I look at journeys, the real distinctiveness comes from leveraging your superpowers, right? And all of us have that superpower. For me, the unique things which I feel is problem solving, people, listening, whatever, a certain set of things which has led me to me doing what I do. But while managing weaknesses is an important thing, the real returns will come from doubling down on superpowers. So don't let go of that and work on that, seek feedback, figure out what's unique. And I think the other thing I wish I knew earlier was that each journey is unique. One of the guests at the podcast was a lady called Anu Mangaonkar. She is a partner of the McKinsey Global Institute, which is a think tank within McKinsey. And she used it each one of us is an SKU of one, stock keeping unit of one. So we often think that we are a batch of 600, we are a batch of 60, classroom of 60. No, because the context you come from, your parents, your story, your siblings, your financial context, your dreams, your aspirations is all very, very individual. So don't lose sight of that individuality while there is a collective wave that you belong to. Finally, each one of us has to solve this puzzle as an individual. Those are the two key things.
Yeah, thank you so much. We can go on, but I'm sure there's, there are some questions out there from the audience. So I'm going to stop and so who wants to go first?
There's a lady there.
Oh, okay. Get the.
Hello. sir. Good evening. First of all, thank you so much for this insightful session. I just wanted to ask, how do you define growth in leadership? What is your thought on it?
Give me, actually, sorry, if you could expand on where the question comes from. Just let me understand the question a little better.
Sir, so you spoke about so many ways, like we should journal and all the relationship aspect that you talked about. I just wanted to understand how can we actually put it to a mindset that will help us become better leaders in the future.
See, I think, once again, it might be difficult to give a broad brush answer because what is growth for me might be different from what is growth for you or somebody else. But I would say some of the building blocks I would say are self-awareness, which is a combination of reflection and seeking good quality feedback. What happens very often is as you grow, you might stop receiving good feedback because you get to a position of power, people don't speak the truth to you. So you need to work that extra hard to gather feedback. So that is one set. The other growth might also be growth from a unidimensional sense to a multidimensional sense. I spoke about flavor. That might be the other sector of growth. So I think it depends on where you are, but I think in the initial years, I would say, this is again, one of the person who anchored the book launch, Prakash Iyer, he's an anchor and a friend, and he uses the phrase PhD. He says passion, hunger, and discipline. That when you're young, just ensure that you focus on what gives you energy, have the fire in the belly, and have the discipline to put action, because nothing gets done. Ideas are plenty, right? There are a million ideas, but really the ones that make a difference are the ones that are able to convert that to action. So I would sort of simplify it to a PhD.
Thank you so much, sir.
Transactional. Often, like I can go to my teachers or professors, but how do I make it not transactional? And how do I find somebody who aligns with my needs?
Good question. Sorry, could you also share your name?
I'm Tanmay.
Good question, Tanmay. Again, I must say, growing up, I did not have a mentor. Right? I think I did not. My parents didn't have a network or whatever. It was largely friends and other people. It's only really when I started working, actually, as you rightly said, in college, for example, there was one particular professor, Dr Raman, who was an operations professor who took an interest in me, and I remember one particular exam where I did a poor job. We had to analyze a case, and I remember there were multiple deadlines. I was generally good in operations management. That particular one, I just did a lazy submission, and because there were 20 other things going on, maybe I was applying for jobs, I wasn't prepared. He called me to his room and he said, I can give you a D for this, but I know you can do better than this. I'm going to give you 24 hours. Prove me that you can do better. Right? So, in a way, I knew that sometimes you will notice that some people warm up to you. Now, it's hard to predict who will warm up to you. Just grab them, don't let go of them, right? So I've been in touch with him. He currently is a professor at Melbourne Business School. We still exchange notes and talk. And I think now there's no real interest or there's no particular topic, but sometimes his vantage point is very different. So he'll say something which will trigger a thought. But I think when you start working, you might find some bosses might warm up to you, you will like them, and some people will also invest in you. See, you will find a lot of people who are capable, but you want somebody who is capable, but also somebody who takes an interest in you, in your growth. Now it's difficult to, and once again, I go back to the metaphor of dating, right? Sometimes you need to meet few people, you will know that somewhere there'll be a click. But the key thing is don't let go of them. You might change the job, you might go to another job, but find a mechanism of staying in touch with people. And you never know. Like this weekend I'm in Chennai, I'm spending time with one of my early bosses, A.G. Giridharan. He was my first or second boss at KPMG. So he called me to say, can you do a session for my team? I said, I'd love to. So it's a privilege to go back and do something. So you will have to find ways of reconnecting with some of those people. And the other person that he spoke about, Govind Iyer, he was my boss in Egon Zehnder. So he's a mentor and he keeps guiding me. I sort of meet him once in 6 months. So I would say don't rush the process. See, like what I've also realized, these things emerge over time, but when you find those people, grab them, don't let go. That's what I would say.
Hello sir, I'm Nikhil. I have so I have two related questions. My question number one is, you've given quite a lot of weightage to passion on one side, whether it's PhD or talking about how important it is to know what you love. You've also talked about doubling on your superpower or strength.
Yes.
So first of all, what's this? I have always felt passion over strength, because in a world of abundance, if you are passionate about something, you can manage. What's your take? Maybe if there's a ratio or what. The second is related is that जो दिखता है वो passion है नहीं, और जो passion है वो दिखता नहीं. So often I just met 15 years we spent here. I was a student also here. So during this reunion, one of them said, यार अब मुझे लग रहा है मेरा passion कुछ और है. तो I said, तब क्या था? तब तो यार पैसा बनाना था, वही passion लगता था, उससे related. So making an assumption that self-awareness is not so high, what is the litmus test for a person to know what I am passionate about, and then work with that ratio to make some life choices?
Deep question. See, the first point I would make is life is not static. Very often when I look at questions like what is your passion, I'll add another question, what is your purpose? One of the things I discuss in the book also is that these are like asking a 5-year-old, beta tumko kya banna hai? Because these are all too heavy questions. So I would say rather focus on what gives you joy, and passion will emerge. Focus on adding value and making a difference, and then purpose will emerge. Rather than saying, "Mera purpose ye hai, to main ye banunga." Right? So to me, number one, I feel the wheel of life keeps spinning. My passion when I was in my 8th standard was cricket. But I was the same cohort as you might have heard the name Murli Karthik. He played cricket for India. He was a spinner, he's a commentator. I and he went to the same cricket training program. He was a much better cricketer than I was. I would have given him an A+, I was probably a B+ cricketer. But I got a call at the end of the summer camp saying, why don't you come and train 4 days a week at this cricket academy in Chennai. My father looked at me and said, "Nahi, guys, And I think it was the right advice. My passion at that stage was cricket, but I don't think we had the luxury of going behind that, because, and I think my father's talent assessment was also right. My fitness, my capabilities were okay, not great. So, and today my passion, I might say, is guitar. Maybe 10 years later, maybe it's something, maybe it's rock climbing or mountaineering or something, right? So the one point I would make is sometimes we treat these as static variables, but I think they are dynamic variables, and as life context changes, what we enjoy and passion changes, number one. Number two, I agree with you. The world does not pay you for your passion, right? The world pays you for your skills, and that comes from strength. So my related point would be, if you're passionate about something, you will be really good and get good at it. So the book I really love in this context is a book I would recommend to all of you, So Good They Cannot Ignore You by Cal Newport. It's a wonderful book. And the point he makes is, follow your passion is incomplete advice and actually often bad advice. Because finally the world does not, your ticket price is not based on your passion. You pay for Ed Sheeran because he's good. He was passionate about the guitar, then he spent 20 years practicing it, and then he's a musician, so he sells stadiums. But that's not because he's passionate, it's because he's good. So passion can be the fuel that builds the skill, but that's not the ticket to success. That's the way I see it. I don't know if that answers your question.
Perfect answer. The litmus test. Okay, you also said that joy.
Yes, that's the micro litmus test.
Hello sir, great conversation. I'll also share something in common with you, that is, even I'm associated with SVP. Something I don't share with you is your interest in non-traditional behavior.
That's okay.
So I wanted to know, in the process of getting to know who you are, you suggested one of the things is you need to explore, you need to experiment. I feel that there needs to be a pleasure to it. There might be something for exploring too much. So how do we distinguish that? How do we know ahead whether we found it, it's enough?
a good question. What's your name, sir? Prem. Prem. Once again, I think even this discovery is a journey. Right? I don't think there's a magic answer to say there are 20 things, this is the bullseye. I think getting to the bullseye, I think, is a multi-year journey. So I would take that load off your back to say, I need to find the answer now. And one of the things I've learned, once again, from one of the podcast guests, it's a lady called Herminia Ibarra. She's a teacher at Madras. And she actually says you need to act your way into a new way of thinking. You can't think your way into a new way of acting. So you will try something. What I would suggest is, based on the broad interest you have, make a directional choice. Don't oversweat that being the perfect choice or the right choice, because then that's paralyzing. Make a directional choice. You like something, maybe branch off, do something else, and eventually the idea is to eventually get to the sort of the center of the maze. But I think the litmus test once again is finding the right sweet spot of what you enjoy. Are you able to put at it, and can you play the long game? It's sort of really, for example, if I take my instance, management consulting, solving problems. The first exit I took of the motorway was people-related work. Still advisory, consulting services, but people. In that I said, okay, people-related work, maybe less judgment, more counsel, more sort of growth, sort of poaching to coaching, but that's the next turn. And from that turn I said, okay, maybe I can do a podcast. From that I said, okay, maybe I can do a book. So I think you sort of, I don't know if you've seen the movie No Country for Old Men. Have you? There's one scene where he's walking, he's trying to find the guy with the money, and he's got that beeper, and he's riding on the highway. And as he goes close to the motel, that beep starts flashing faster and faster. So that's the metaphor for me. You're trying to find that, and you need to sort of tune into that beeper. If it's going faster, then you know you're closer to the answer.
Okay, one more. Maybe that's the last question. There's something else they forget.
Question from our alum from the batch of 2005. He has joined us online via YouTube Live. As a leader of an organization, how can I ensure that the individuals in the team have their space, freedom to operate, but at the same time ensure alignment towards the same goal?
Wow. If only there was a magic answer to this. I think this is again, it's a very difficult question to answer in broad terms, right? I think many books have been written on how to motivate people, how to inspire, how to delegate. But I think the one, if I make a directional comment, again, this is something I learned from a gentleman called Stephen M.R. Covey. He's the son of the legendary Stephen Covey, who wrote the book 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he says, generally, given the world of business is moving from command and control to inspire and enroll. And very often I find business leaders, especially in a little more of the industrial setting, saying this is the target, this is how it's done, do you do this, you break down targets and I'll give you and I'll measure you by targets. But I think given the velocity of change, and people talk about VUCA word and Barney word, brittle, anxious, non-linear and incomprehensible, I find that if we can sort of create a sense of shared values and ensure people are given adequate. I think the other person who's spoken about this, Dan Pick, he talks about autonomy, mastery and purpose. Give people adequate autonomy, give them an opportunity to grow, and align them around a broader purpose for which they're working, then hopefully they'll grow. But the specifics will vary based on the context.
Okay, so Deepak, amongst your various skills, I believe you're also a juggler.
Yes, I like it.
So we've got some balls here for you to juggle.
Okay.
Where are we?
I've never juggled in front of an audience. But
It's something. Yeah, there are a pick of balls. Yeah. So either the tennis balls or the white.
So I juggle 3 balls. There are different patterns that we can do with 3 balls.
So just bear with me, balls fly, just like the circus when the elephant can kick a ball. So just be aware that ball might be coming towards you. So.
Thank you so much. Yeah. So now over to you. Yeah. Concluding.
On behalf of Somaiya Institute of Management, I would like to invite Professor Sudarshan Shirsad to present a scroll and express our gratitude.
Thank you, Careers and Conversations, and Arun sir for this wonderful opportunity. I take this as an honor. Before I express this scroll, let me tell you, sir, it was really wonderful listening to you. Deepak sir, am I audible?
You want to hold this?
Maybe, sir. From IIT Madras, where dreams took flight, to IIM Ahmedabad's guiding light. With London business schools shaping his way, Deepak's foundation was set to stay. A consultant once in a global domains, he mastered transitions, broke new chains. Strategizing with clients, solutions profound. At McKinsey, KPMG, Deepak's found his ground. Egon Zehnder came next, where leadership grew, building team and shaping talent anew. In boardrooms and teams, he stood the test. Deepak helped organizations thrive, reach their best. With Antarang Foundation, he builds with care, guiding youth from challenges to path fair. Creating opportunities, empowering the young, Deepak helps their dreams be bravely sung. But now his focus, sharp and clear, is on lives he touches year by year. Through podcasts and books, his influence grows, and play to potential, Deepak's wisdom flows. From consulting to coaching, his journey refined, empowering leaders, helping them find their true potential, their purpose and might. Deepak's work continues to ignite the light. I really think it was a really beautiful poem, nice and wonderful.
I'm going to be updating my LinkedIn profile with this.
I request Rashi to come forward with the mug, which we would like you, sir, to sign us as a moment of honor.
everyone look here. Yeah, done. Come closer. Yeah, ready everyone, look here. Wait, huh? Yeah, done.
I would like to express my heartfelt appreciation to Deepak sir for gracing us. Your presence here has been both inspiring and invaluable. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Raman sir for your invaluable contribution to the fifth lecture of our initiative, Careers and Conversations. Your insights have made this event truly remarkable, sir. I would also extend thanks to Arun sir, Arvind sir, Sudarshan sir, Meenal ma'am, the technical team and the support staff for ensuring the success of the event with their remarkable efforts. Furthermore, I want to acknowledge the continued support of the PR and Branding Committee and the Alumni Committee to everyone present here, students and faculty. I thank you all for joining us for this informative session and being such a great audience. We'll now stop the live stream. I will now thank you for your cooperation. Now I'd request everyone to